Hi, I'm Melissa, and this is The Book Break. And today we have a little bit of a special episode.
And I'm Mario.
And a Mario. So this is our special episode, Mario, right here. Mario is the guy that's always behind the camera, but today he's in front of the camera. So I thought you might want to see him, get his opinion, check out his read shirts. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple of our favorite episodes from 2019 and some of our favorite people too. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Is that cool?
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to talk about first my favorite author that I've interviewed so far, and that is James A. Owen. So James is the only author in my history that first I ever interviewed twice, and second that I was a fangirl of. So the first time I ever interviewed James, I did it, and I was kind of too nervous to talk to him, actually. And so the interview was terrible. We didn't use it. It was bad. And so then we did it again, and that one was a little bit better, although I was super sick. But he was great. Yeah. He was really good to talk to.
When he was 16, he started his own comic book company. Tell me about it.
I loved comics and decided pretty early on that that's what I wanted to do. And so my best friend and I decided to start a mail order service with comic books to raise money to be able to publish our own comic book. And then we realized how much more money it was going to take, and we got a bank loan.
At 16?
At 16. We got a bank loan so we could be exhibitors at the San Diego Comic-Con. And I had a family who worked in print and design, and they helped me find a printer, and I wrote and illustrated and published a comic book and started that career. And starting at that age, here at Superstars, we had a panel on comics and graphic novels, and it was myself and Jim Butcher and Kevin J. Anderson.
Yeah.
And they all talked about when they got into comics. And Jim, it's been in the last several years. With Kevin, in 1996. And I suddenly realized I'm the elder statesman of the group for comics because I started in 1986.
Wow. And when did you switch from comics to novels? Because you have, how many novels do you have out?
14 or 15.
And one of your most popular that is, I have to admit, one of my favorites.
Here There Be Dragons was the beginning of the series, the Chronicles of the Imaginarium Geographica. The first prose series I did, though, was called Myth World. And that came about because of a German fan of my comic books who turned out to be a very prominent author named Kai Meyer. And he loved my comics, and he worked out a publishing deal with one of his publishers to do a shared world series called Myth World, and he asked me to write one of the books, and I did, and none of the other authors had done anything on it, so I ended up writing the books in the series.
And what year was that?
Heavens to Betsy, that's 20 years ago.
All right. So.
And the first Mythworld book actually won the AI Award for Best International Novel in Germany. But it gave me the experience I needed when I had the chance to write Here There Be Dragons, to write and illustrate at the peak of the abilities that I developed. And I illustrate the books. Every chapter has an illustration. I illustrate the covers. And that's all because of my career in comics, because I was used to illustrating my own stories.
In addition to that, you have some motivational books.
The motivational books came about as a result of the book tour for Here There Be Dragons for Simon & Schuster. And I realized if I had the chance to talk to 400 or 500 students for an hour, I didn't want to just try to sell them books. I wanted to talk to them about things that were more important and long-lasting than that, things that I felt were important to communicate to other human beings about motivating each other and elevating each other and learning to overcome the struggles that you have, that we all have, to do something that you love with your life.
Yeah.
And that became the talk Drawing Out the Dragons, which became the first of 3 books called The Meditations, which are all about that, about overcoming the challenges we all have to do something extraordinary.
And James is a New York Times best-selling author. He's also a really amazing speaker. So he does fantasy, and he has inspirational books like Drawing Out the Dragons is one of my favorites. And I really think you should check him out.
The first time, the reason why I want to talk about that is I had never met Melissa until that day. And we were thrown into this situation, and I was told, there's this person by our friend, Tony Todd, suggested that we do a show together. And so I had just met her, and then we were all of a sudden, for some reason, over interviewing James Owen, and we didn't talk about it, we just did it. And it was okay, but we did it a second time in Colorado earlier, 2019, so that's why we think that's a memorable interview. So my second most memorable episode of the year was Timothy Zahn. Timothy Zahn is memorable to me because not only was he super wicked nice, he let a line fill up, while we were filming for 7 minutes. He let a line accumulate because he's very popular. Star Wars and so many other science fiction franchise.
Because
Sure.
you're a veteran at writing.
Yes, I am.
And I want to know, how did you get started?
I watched a bad TV show and I said, I could write a better story than that. So I sat down over the next 2 weeks in my spare time, wrote a story that was pretty bad, but it was fun. So I kept it up as a hobby till I started selling stories. My doctorate project in physics basically went nowhere. There was a problem with it. So I started writing full-time in 1980 and been going at it ever since.
And you continuously have new books coming out. In fact, you have
Yes.
a new trilogy right now.
Yes.
Let's talk about your Thrawn.
Okay.
Tell me more about this.
Okay, Thrawn was a character I created back in 1991 for the Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, Last Command. He has proven popular enough over the years that even when all the old books were declared legends, he was still very popular among the fans. And then, 3-4 years ago, Star Wars Rebels brought him back as a main villain in seasons 3 and 4. And when they did that, they asked me to write a new book, which was the book Thrawn. After that was doing well, they asked me to do a second, became Thrawn Alliances, and this is the third in the trilogy, Thrawn Treason. So Thrawn continues to be popular, which is very cool for me.
Yeah. Since you've been writing since the 80s,
Yeah.
what would you say is your favorite book? Maybe your pet project that you just love?
You're asking who my favorite child is, basically. I have, I like them all. They
Yes.
were all the best I could do at the given time that I was writing it. The Star Wars books are, of course, the most popular,
Yeah.
but I've also got a following for the Cobra books, Conqueror's Trilogy, the Black Collars, Quadrille series, Dragonback.
Thrawn,
yeah.
the character Thrawn. He created this character, and now he's in like all kinds of novel canon. It's a little complicated to go into the whole whatever's in novels is in novels, and what's in the movies is not canon. But we won't get into that. Timothy Zahn is a great guy, and it was a
Yeah.
great interview.
Yeah, and he really has incredible books. So if you haven't checked him out, you need to. And super nice guy. I always love it when the good writers are also nice people.
It's nice when they're nice.
Yes.
And everyone in both seasons of the book break the authors have been super awesome with their time, and
Absolutely.
they really didn't have to do these interviews, but they did.
You started in the 80s. How did you get started? So for our aspiring authors out there, what was your process?
Well, I would write stories in those days. There were a lot of print magazines, science fiction magazines, and I started writing short stories, and I would send them out to the various magazines, Analog, Asimov Science Fiction, Fantasy and Science Fiction, a whole bunch of the smaller ones that were there now.
Yeah.
Most of those are gone now, but they're replaced with e-zines, online and such. So I found it easiest to break in writing short fiction. I had 20 or 30 of them published before I was ready to do a novel, and it was the strength of the short stories that got my agent's attention, and I signed, he contacted me, I've signed on with him and been with him 37 odd years.
Wow. So really refining your craft.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, writing is one of those things you can easily learn, well, easily. You can learn by yourself. You don't need a tennis pro or have to take skiing lessons or something.
Right.
You learn writing by writing. You keep at it, you refine your voice, you learn how to do dialogue and characters and plot and action, description, all of that. And it's a process.
Another interview that we did, and this is one of the interviews who was not an author, and that was Tony Todd. And wow, I gotta say that was one of my very favorite interviews. First of all, as Mario can attest, there were multiple takes. We had to do a lot of takes because we were laughing too hard, honestly. Tony Todd is hilarious. And so as he and I were talking, I mean, I brought up a band he'd never heard of before, and so we started singing, and anyways, he was just a super great, fun guy.
Hey! What's up? I'm hanging out with the cool kids today.
That's right. Oh, I love this guy. Okay, so I'm super excited to talk to him. Now, Tony here, he's kind of a big deal. This is why I wear my big heels, so I can try to be a big deal like him.
I'm glad I wore a jacket today. Then. Okay.
Okay, so we all know who Tony Todd is, right? So Tony was on The Flash. Tony was...
Zoom, zoom, zoom.
And I think he's pretty fast, too.
Zoom, zoom, zoom. I've already gone around the world like 5 times since you started talking to me.
Right. I mean, he's like so fast you can't even tell. It's awesome. Okay, so Tony, I gotta know. Did you read the comic The Flash before you did the part?
Let me tell you something. I was an only kid. I was rescued by my aunt at age 3. Saved my life. And she used to always give me the change to go. I didn't even know we were poor until I was 13. But I was a DC Comics guy.
Oh,
I read Flash, Green Lantern, Batman, of course, was my favorite. I wasn't so much into Superman, but it's okay. Don't get a complex, all you Superman kryptonite people out there. I did work on Smallville, though. And so every time I get a chance, an opportunity to work on a DC-related project, I jump at it.
Awesome.
So when Zoom came up, it was like written in the stars. And all those times, my first scripts were, comic books. And of course, putting on a towel that I borrowed from my grandmother. And she would hear me thump on the floor and say, "Don't you keep trying to fly, you idiot." So she didn't call me an idiot.
Right. So I gotta know, how excited were you when this came?
Never forget, I am the fastest man alive.
Did you go back and open up your comic books? Do you still have them?
Of course I do. I went to my favorite. I have a collection. I have some good stuff. I'm a Neil Adams fan, so I have a lot of his classic work with Speedy and the Arrow, Green Arrow and stuff. I got to meet a lot of these writers and artists doing the pop culture cons, which is fascinating to me. Just to see them and give them their respect. Because a lot of times you'll see them in the artist role and people aren't really coming up to them. And these are the guys that fueled our imaginations when we were kids and adults. All right? It isn't just Stan Lee, rest in peace. It's the writers, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, all these people, Chris Claremont. So they know who they are.
So did you pull out your collection?
Of course. And I went to a Big Apple comic store, which is a huge comic store, and I pulled up some old stuff. And they see me all the time because I had to go back because I recently did Dark Side for a Reign of Superman.
I plucked your lifeless corpse from the void and handed you a chance.
And I had to go get some Dark Side reference stuff. And Warner Brothers signed me to a 3-appearance contract to play Dark Side. So we've only done 1 so far. So he's coming back.
That's so great. Okay, so I also know you have Focus.
Focus.
Tell me about that.
Well, I'm the Goodwill Ambassador for Focus, which is a comic book created for and by altruistic kids. And it's a really good project because they get to do different variant covers. They get to have a workshop space set up behind us where they can come and practice with these celebrated artists here. There's Doug, who's a teacher.
I'm the main artist for Focus Comic.
And Focus Comic, you guys do some incredible things to help autistic children. And this is Yvonne. and she was just telling me about how with Focus, you donate proceeds. What do you do with the proceeds of Focus?
So with Focus Comic, we're an autism awareness project. We use the Focus budget to help us reach as many states as possible. We're aiming for 50 states. We donate some books to children's homes with autistic kids, and we also use the funds for campaigning.
Something really admirable, he works with nonprofit organizations, one in particular called Focus Comics that we are happy to support, and they work with autistic children and even adults and put out a comic book that is all done by children and adults that are autistic, and they have great programs, and we were introduced to them through Tony Todd, and super fun interview. He was our episode 4 in season 1, and so check that out, and check out Focus Comics because they are a really good organization that I would definitely recommend we all support.
If you're an artist, you have to be an humanitarian.
Yes.
It goes hand in hand, and if you're not, then you're wasting the gift that God has given you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Keep up the good work. Give me a hug. Thank you.
Tony hugged me.
It's my turn to be a fanboy. I keep catching him in Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
Episodes, and he's in almost all the. If you look on his IMDb, Tony Todd has been, I think, on almost every TV show of Star Trek. He really liked the episode of the book break.
Yeah.
So he helped us out in that regard.
He did, and that was when we were brand new and no one really knew us yet, and he was super happy to just jump in and help us, and he even went and talked about us on his social media, and so that was a big boost for us too, and it was really fun getting to interview him.
So my most memorable episode of 2019 was interviewing Edward Savio. Edward, super wicked nice guy, wrote an audio book called Alexander X, a book called Alexander X, and its audio book has hit #1 on Audible and a bunch of other audio book sites,
which is incredible for a first-time author.
He's mostly a screenwriter, but yeah, first-time book, and he's done really well. The reason why we got that interview was my friend, who I haven't seen in a while since this Sundance, Lisa Lindo. Lisa, awesome person, was his publicist for Edward. And she called me a couple days before FanX in September and said, Mario, can you do anything about getting me interviews for Edward? And I said, well, funny you should mention, I'm producer and editor and cinematographer on a show called The Book Break. I'm sure my partner would like to do an interview. And she said, oh, that's amazing. So we set it up. Edward came out to FanX. We got him close to where he was about to leave. We were waiting all day to do it, and we finally got it.
Yeah.
So Edward Savio with Alexander X audiobook is doing really well, like super wicked well.
We were like in #1 in fiction, #1 in sci-fi, #1 in humor, believe it or not, #1 in time travel, even though there's no real time travel in the book. But the character himself is 1,500 years old, so when he tells us a story, he can tell us a story from, 200 years ago, and he looks basically the same. So Alexander X is the title of the book, of the first book, and the second one is also out called Ancient Among Us, and both the first 2 books have been narrated by the great Will Wheaton, and it's so much fun, honestly. Like, you hear Will do your words, you hear Will talking and saying your own words, and it's mind-blowing. Like, it's right here.
Someone once told me my name means the defender of mankind. Unfortunately, it may actually come to that.
You're wearing the headphones, and you're like, oh my God, Will Wheaton is in my head, and it was a great experience.
Okay,
and
so
then
when
now
you
everybody
write,
else.
do you hear Will in your head now?
I didn't at first, but during the second book, because he'd already done the first book, I heard there were a couple of places that I heard him, and what it did was
I thought Edward Savio, Timothy Zahn, James A. Owen, and the Tony Todd episode on Book Break. If you don't know who Tony Todd is, then I don't know what to tell you on that one. But.
All right. Well, and we hope that you've enjoyed this year with the book break, and there will be many more episodes to come. We're still coming out every week in 2020 with the book break. So join us for next year. We'll see you then.